Hey everyone, Touch Designer Basics, part 1 here. By the end of this video, we're going to end up with something like this, getting some tops, some texture operators in here, various images, movies mixed together, composited in various ways, and just to kind of learn some of the basics of the UI, of navigation, things like that. So let's just delete that. Overall, we have different operator families called tops, chops, sops, mats, that's. Here, this is called the Create Dialog. To get this, you can either double click on the backgrounds like so, or hit tab, and this pops up like that. And actually, you might see, because I had already changed this kind of grid. Let me go up to preferences here. If you look in preferences, where is it? Network here. I think usually grid brightness is something like up here actually. So if you're just starting, you probably see a grid like this. I turn it off sometimes, so I'll just leave it there for now. So to start, we're going to just look at tops. So texture operators. What this means is these all deal with images, with, passing visual signals in some sort. A lot of these can be more complicated. Like I only use like half of these regularly, maybe. Some of them I've never used in my life. But let's just look at some of the basic. I think the most commonly used, the most useful ones. So I've grabbed a few and kind of named it in a few different categories here. So you can see we've got image generators. So these operators don't require any inputs. They generate and output something themselves. So movie file in, top brings in some image or movie file. Noise generates sort of random pattern of noise. Ramp is a gradient of some sort. Constant is just a solid color. Circle makes a circle, rectangle, and then text. So these other ones, image modifiers, so they do some sort of effect or filtering of an input. So all of these you can see it's giving me an error because they require some sort of input going into them. But these are all various visual effects: blur, edge, hue, saturation, value, level, threshold, transform. And then blending and switching. They take multiple inputs and combine them or switch between them, or composite between them. So composite top, cross top, switch top are a few useful examples. So let's just get started. Let's make our own movie file in. So I'm going to double click that, movie file in. And by default, we have the famous Touch Designer banana. Every operator has its own kind of collection of parameters that you can change. So if I have this operator selected, I hit P, and then this pops up over here. I don't want the banana movie, so I'm going to hit this little plus sign. This will open up the Touch Designer kind of samples folder here. And I know this folder nature has a few movies in it. So whatever, I'll just get movie 1. Okay, great. So we've got this kind of standard movie thing. Okay, so I'm going to add something else. I'm going to add a level. So a couple ways we can do this. I could just double click over here. I'm going to add a level top, and I could click, drag that in right there. And then maybe we could kind of like click these, make them bigger or smaller. Typically, I could do this, but I feel like you get into trouble if you make one bigger, then you end up having to make all of them bigger or smaller or whatever. Another way to do this, right click directly on this output, get level, and then it kind of automatically connects it, and it's the viewer display box is the right size. Okay, cool. So level, if you're familiar with Photoshop, this does a lot of the same things. So invert, black level, brightness, gamma, contrast. So all these kind of visual effects happen in real time. We've got different tabs here. So this would like happen first. Range kind of changes the high and low value range. We can affect high and low for individual channels. So kind of if we lower the high G, that is basically attenuating the amount of green in the pixels there. So I don't know what we want to do here. It's something like that. Okay. Step will kind of quantize values. So if I do something like step size, there we go. This creates a kind of solarizing effect. And tweak that to your heart's content. Actually, don't really want that right now, so I'm going to turn that off. And then post, this kind of a final gamma opacity brightness that would happen at the end of all of these processes. So whatever, how about boost that up a little bit? Okay, I kind of like all that. Super. And I don't know, let's do something else. Let's do like an edge. How about that? Okay. So edge detection runs an edge detection algorithm here. We can see it's finding the edges in here based on the luminance. I can kind of look at different channels. Luminance is fine for us now. We can change strength. Kind of tweak that. Yeah, that looks fine. I'm okay with that. Maybe. Actually, let's make that a little more dramatic. Okay, cool. All right. Whatever. And then let's composite this with some other kind of gradient color. How about that? Or should we combine? Okay, I was just deliberating if I want to comp over input. There's this other little setting here in the edge. We can see composite over input. If we turn that on, then we can see it kind of maintains the input right here, and it adds just the edge on top. So that could be kind of a cool effect. So fine, let's just keep that. And so what else do I want to add to this? Maybe let's do a ramp. So I'm going to add. You know what? Let's do it like this. I'll do a little ramp just for the edge. This will be cool. Okay, let's do, I don't know, vertical. Let's add some color to this. There we go. Okay. So we can add little keys in our ramp. We can add as much as we want. Okay, I'm cool with that. And so here we can kind of see, so the ramp by default, it looks like a square here. Before I'm working with, if I middle mouse click here, I can see that the size of all these things up here are 1280 by 720. And I get a lot of other really handy info also. By default, the ramp is 256 by 256. So middle mouse click gives us this info, and also kind of what I'm doing here, just 3-button mouse is very important. If you just have like a laptop trackpad or whatever, I find that to be really difficult to work with Touch Designer. So, you know, left mouse button is moving around like this. Scroll wheel middle button is kind of scrolling in and out like this. If you want to select a group of things, right click, and this creates this little box like so. Okay. And middle mouse button also has some other cool parameter things, which we'll get into in a minute. So for now, all I know is, okay, this is 1280 by 720. The ramp is 256 square. That's fine, but let's take a look at this next thing. Let's do a composite. And the composite has this kind of open notch right here, which means it can accept as many different inputs as you want to give it. So let's go ahead and boom. And I can see now my composite is 256, which is essentially like squishing down all the pixels right here, which is not really what I want. I mean, that looks kind of cool and all, but let's see how I can change that. So composite top has some other settings here. Operations, so all these different types of operations it can do, which are essentially like the blending modes in Photoshop, if you're familiar with that. So if we do soft. I think a soft light looks pretty good. So let's look at why in this next tab here, transform. Let's see why this kind of squished down to 256. Fixed layers, input 2. And so what that means is if there is amongst other things, if there is a difference in resolution between the two inputs, it will take the resolution of input 2, which is 256. That's why this became 256. So to get around that, we can do something like this. We can change that to input 1, and now you see that is 1280. So that's fine. Another way we can kind of fix that is from the beginning, and this looks fine and all. We don't need to change this, but on our ramp, we could go ahead and just make this 1280 by 720, so we don't have to even worry about this fixed layer thing. So on the ramp, if we go into the Common tab, so for a lot of these things, the Common tab, even when we go back to our movie file in, I didn't even look at all these things. This is a little more advanced, but Common tab, there's always this output resolution situation. Every time we see a Common tab over here, so common, so all these things have this output resolution. So if we do that for our ramp, you can see, because it doesn't have an input, it's generating this itself. So resolution 256, I could just click this little thing and let's grab a preset 1280 by 720. Beautiful. And so now it's kind of a moot point. We don't have to even worry about which layer is fixed because this is the same resolution. You might notice also I've got this letterboxing thing happening when I change the resolution. To get rid of that, I just kind of click this little corner like that. It doesn't actually affect anything, just a kind of OCD thing if you want to organize your things more nicely. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this composite. It's doing a soft light operation on that. And so now maybe I'm going to do another blending, another composite, sorry. So let's composite this with that. Boom. And I don't want multiply. Let's do over. Okay, that's looking pretty good now. I kind of like that. So this is going over the other thing because this obviously has transparency. It has an alpha channel. So when you put that over that, the other thing will show up in the bottom. I could switch the level, the kind of stacking order of these. If I click this, so now this one is on top of that, we can see. So now when that's over that, then the bottom doesn't show up at all because there's no transparency in that. But that looks pretty good, I think. Okay. All right, so what else should we do here? Let's do something like let's go ahead and end this with a null for one thing. Null doesn't do anything, but it's a nice sort of handy end point, little bookend for our situation. And a great thing about Touch Designer, I mean, all these different operators have a viewer in it, so I can see at every step of the way what's happening inside each little module, little node. But I can also click this little display, this little blue flag, little dot right there, and that'll show up in the background. I could do this for multiple ones, and then it all kind of like stacks up like that. So if you want to kind of compare two operators, that could be helpful. I tend to like to kind of end with a null or an out top and click that little blue dot, and I could see my output a little bigger. So that looks pretty good. So let's add a little something extra. Let's do a little rectangle over here. And what I want to do, I want to do like another movie file in. And for this one, what did I have? I had like a little cloudy thing, maybe. Let's try that. Fine. Yeah, that's more of an environmental map, isn't it? Let's do a little flower. Cool. All right, that's 1280 also. Okay, so now I've got this other image. I've got this rectangle thing. That also by default 256. I'm going to go ahead just do the same thing like I did with the ramp. Okay, cool. So let's say I want to do a little masking of my flower thing here. So I can do the same thing. I do like a composite here. Let's just do that. Just keep to the composite. Got two of them right there. By default, composite does a multiply, so you can kind of see what happens here. You know, these operations are basically just doing math with these two different layers. It's doing a multiplying each pixel by its corresponding pixel in the other layer. So a white pixel multiplied by anything would be itself. This alpha 0 would be a 0 multiplied by anything is 0. Therefore, this is functioning like a mask. And I could do, let's change this a little bit. Whatever, make it a little smaller. Actually, you know what, I'm gonna. So here, before this little multiply, I realize I want to maybe change this scale a little bit to kind of line up the flower a little bit better. So what I can do here, if I just right click on this little line here, I can insert an operator, and I'm going to insert a transform. Okay, cool. And let's just do, I can change scale, rotate, translate, all these, right? So I'm like, cool, all right, love it. Translate. So I could type in values here, but this another way that the middle mouse button really helps. Let's just go to scale, actually. I can click the middle mouse button, and then I get this value ladder. So I'm still holding the middle mouse button. I can then drag this left or right, and then it changes in increments according to whatever I selected here. So if I go all the way down to 0.001, now I go left or right, you can see it's changing in a very small increment. If I go up to like 10 and then do this, it's changing in these huge increments. So this is a good way to kind of scrub values. By doing that on the actual name of the parameter, it changes both of these simultaneously. If I only want to change, let's say, X scale, I can just go here, and then that's only changing X scale, or vice versa. So let's go back. I don't know, maybe bring this down. Let's make that back to 0. Maybe translate a little bit. Okay, cool. So that kind of frames the flower a little bit better. And okay, so now what I want to do now? Let's do like, I'm gonna get a little frame around that, I think. So I could make another rectangle. Let's just click that, copy paste. But instead of a fill, I could do fill alpha, border. Let's do border pixel, like 2, border color. Right, so now just by changing the parameters here, I can make this as just a kind of an outline. The thing is, though, if I change this, then I'd have to manually change this, and it might get to be a pain. So I could just use, that's a really simple thing here. It's easy enough. I could just do another edge. See, like that kind of did the same thing. So now if I changed this at all, let's go back to my rectangle. Let's say if I did like a different size or whatever, that's going to change automatically. It makes my life a little bit easier. Fine. Okay, cool. All right, middle outline, and let's do another. I could do another composite. There's other operators, like here's an over, there's a multiply, there's an add. So these things are identical to the operations we find in the composite top, except they only do one thing. So I did like over right here. So that is the same thing as if I did composite, pew, pew, and then selected operation over. Cool. So why, I don't know, what's the difference? So ostensibly, this would be slightly more efficient computationally. Composite still maintains the ability to have more than 2 inputs, whereas if you get any of these like add, what are the other ones? Like difference, multiply, over, these things that are kind of single blending modes, they only allow you 2 inputs. So whatever. sure, let's just keep composite just in case we want to add more or change it later. Fine. Okay, cool. I like that. And so we've got this little group right here, and now I want to bring this over that thing. So I'm going to just right click here, insert. I'll just do an over for this one. Bring that down, and let's actually, no, I don't want it like that. I want to switch. So this should actually be on top. So let's just do this again. I could right click this, disconnect. If I bring this down to where this becomes yellow, it replaces it. And I'll drag that over. All right, beautiful. And actually, let's do another transform. This whole situation is a little too big. Okay, fine. Looks great. So what else? Let's add a noise just to make that look a little bit better. So how can we do this? Let's drag this over. So again, to select all these, I right click and then just drag it together. So let's add a noise. Okay. By default, we see it like that. I'm going to go ahead. So I'm just going to make this 1280 also. Let's monochrome off so we have lots of colors. And some of the parameters here. Seed creates a kind of just different random pattern. Period basically makes it kind of bigger or smaller. Harmonics. Harmonic spread has this different quality. Harmonic gain. Amplitude. So, if we think about, let me bring this back down to more kind of normal setting here. Okay. So if we look at one of the other things here, so size, format, 8-bit fixed RGBA. So kind of standard thing, 8-bit RGBA means that if we talk about 0 to 255 would be a value for RGB and A. Within Touch Designer, that's normalized to 0 to 1. So when we say amplitude and offset, let's see if I do amplitude 0, offset 0. Okay, so now all the pixel values are 0. If I did, let's say, offset 1, so now all of the pixel values kind of start at 1, and they're going plus or minus by 0, so all of the values are 1. If I did something like offset 0.5, now all of them are kind of middle gray. So if I did amplitude 0.5, now that means, so we're kind of in the middle for RGB. So it's RG and B, the alpha stays at 100% at 1. But amplitude is 0.5. That means, this is kind of random noise. So they're starting at 0.5. They're going up to 1. And also maybe down to 0. If I did amplitude like 0.1. So now they're just kind of the offset, they're kind of anchored at this 0.5 value, and they're going up to 0.6 and maybe down to 0.4. So this is a kind of, thinking about the actual values for the pixels. And I can also see this, some other info. So I showed you this middle mouse click here. I can click this little viewer active thing here and right click, and I can display pixel values. And this gives me some other info like RGBA in the 0 to 255, and then down here in that normalized 0 to 1. So you can see as I move my cursor around, we can see those pixel values. So that's kind of cool. And also the kind of X and Y, which is the actual pixel values, and then U and V is normalized 0 to 1. So that shows you some other cool info. So right click. Sometimes you want to see that, sometimes not. So, okay, let's just make period a lot bigger. Let's do it like that. Something. It's kind of hot. Something like maybe period a little bit lower. How about 10? Okay, cool. All right, so I don't know, what am I doing here? Let's just do like another composite. And, ooh, okay, that's cool. Okay, that's it right there. Okay. Okay, so I kind of liked what was happening there, but when I did this little composite, you know what? Maybe do I want to keep my outline? I kind of like that white outline as this little color instead. So I'm just gonna do that mask thing again. Let's do a straight up multiply. Doesn't matter. Multiply it by that again, and now. Okay. Cool. I'm happy with that. Okay, so let's do maybe one more thing. Let's do some other movies here and just add a little switch. Let's do a little copy paste. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm going to do these other files. Let's do movie 2. Just get all these different nature ones. Okay. So let's look at these other blending and switching. We looked a lot at composites. Cross kind of takes in 2 different inputs and kind of does a crossfade between them from 0 to 1. Switch is similar to a crossfade, but as we can see with this kind of open thing here, it can accept any number of inputs. So I'm going to send in, let's get a switch here, select all these, drag this in. So all 5 of these are now going into the switch. And replace that. Okay, great. So now in the switch, so whenever we have a kind of index, it's always 0 indexed, meaning index 0 is referencing the first input. If I do index 1, boom, great. That's now getting this 1, 2, 3, and the last one, 4. Oh wait, did I change this? There we go. Okay. Ooh, that's kind of crazy. Okay, and another cool thing. So if I just kind of zoom through here, it's a kind of hard jump. So even though I see a floating number here, so it stays there, and then when I cross over 3, then it jumps to that. I can do a kind of smooth crossfade if I hit blend between inputs, and then if I do this sort of a thing. So that looks pretty nice. Kind of smooth crossfade between them. I like that. Okay. So let's just keep that maybe right there for now. And maybe that's good enough for part 1.